We're getting a move on here on the right stand. Even as the IT survey in the BBC premises in Delhi and in Mumbai continue to the third straight day, Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar has warned of sinister designs to set afloat a narrative by free fall of information. Jagdeep Dhankar, who was addressing the Indian Information Service probationers, asked them to watch out for such designs and said that the public should not allow free fall of doctored narratives to run down our growth story. Now, without mincing words, the Honorable Vice President raised a misinformation invasion alarm. Now, here are the top 5 attacks. The first attack in his speech: need to counter sinister designs against India's growth story. The second attack: doctored narratives can't be allowed to run down Bharat, India. Attack 3: dumping of information is another way of invasion. Attack 4: we have to boldly neutralize misinformation invasion. And attack 5: misinformation can't be allowed in the name of freedom of expression.
India is on the rise. Sinister designs are there to set afloat a narrative by free fall of information. We have to be alert. This is another way of invasion. We have to boldly neutralize it. We have to stir in us a spirit of nationalism. We cannot allow free fall of doctored narratives to run down our growth story.
So has the Vice President correctly, rightly called out disinfo and this information warfare that's being waged against India's growth story? Let's go straight across to our guest this evening. It's a direct face-off. Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India, is with us, and so is Sanjay Jha, Congress leader and political analyst. Namaste and Jai Hind. Thank you very, very much for your time. Let me ask you, Kanwal Sibal, do you agree, disagree with the Vice President?
I agree with him, but this is an old story, If you remember, Mrs. Gandhi had led this initiative at that time along with other non-aligned countries for a new world information order, because the world information order has been controlled by the West, and it continues to be the case today. They are the ones who set the narratives through various NGOs, various organizations, with all the rankings that they do about democracy and hunger and religious freedom and what have you, which is a tool that they use to pressure countries to follow and subscribe to what they describe are their values. And you see, if you look at the information landscape, even now, it's the New York Times, it's the Washington Post, it's the Economist, it's the Wall Street Journal, it's the Economist, which control the flow of information internationally. And what is now even more worrying in some senses is that this has become part of a hybrid warfare. That you control the information flow, you set the narrative, and we see it very clearly in the case of the Ukraine conflict. That no dissenting voice is allowed to surface. People who might want dialogue and diplomacy are not given access to major social media platforms. They are blanked out from appearance on television. And if somehow they manage through social media and otherwise to say their piece, they are immediately reviled as being sold to Putin, as Russia's stooges and what have you. So they actually, in a sense, demonize these people who want to talk sense. Now in India, and that's the last point I want to make, there's a clear complicity between foreign media and our media, which gives a lot of space to Western narratives through various ways. One, of course, are the Western news agencies, which dominate the flow of information globally. They're not going to pick up TASS or what have you, they will use the Agence France Presse or Associated Press or Reuters or what have you. And they're lazy because they don't want to, and they don't have the means and resources. They don't have reporters on the ground in key countries. So they depend on whatever feed they get. And then our own PTI and others, they also circulate the same kind of stories.
Right.
The other, of course, is that we have these foreign based intellectuals, columnists, economists, or what have you, who write daily in our columns. And they're telling us about the affairs in India.
Correct.
Why don't they concentrate on the affairs in the countries which they have adopted? But sitting in their perch there, they tell us what is wrong with us, what we should do, how we should reform, what are the deficiencies, etc., etc.
So,
the Indian diaspora is involved in this because many of them are very leftist oriented, and then in any case they think they are very liberal, and therefore they don't like this kind of Hindu nationalist stuff that they see going on in India. And then I find it very surprising that our newspapers give so easily columns to foreign ambassadors sitting in Delhi. I have been in diplomatic service for over 40 years. Very difficult in serious countries to get your viewpoint across in an article in a major newspaper. They won't allow it. But here, every Tom, Dick and Harry comes and talks from abroad or locally about how they demonize Russia, they interfere in our foreign relations, and we give them this
we give them a free run.
So I think there's a need for correction. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. We don't have an international channel ourselves. We can't put our views across effectively. And even if we had an international channel, it's not so easy because the Western world will rely on their own channels because they think they reflect the truth.
Well, they already have a mechanism in place which will work in their favor. Like, you cannot ask a question, what is NATO doing on the doorstep of Russia? That's not a question you're supposed to ask. Absolutely. You're supposed to say that NATO is right in being there right outside. Even though the British parliamentary report itself says that they got it all wrong in Libya. It was all a skewed narrative, and that report has come out in September and it's being talked about widely. But your point of view is out there. Let's understand from Sanjay Jha. Where do you stand, Sanjay Jha? Namaste, good to have you on the show after a while.
Yep. Anand, one of my preconditions of being in your program is that I'm not interrupted when I speak. So I do hope that you will honor that contract, and like Mr. Sibal, you will not kind of provide any obstructions. I'll keep my answer briefer than what Mr. Sibal said. Mr. Sibal sounds like the typical right-wing conspiracy theorist. What is the truth? There is no information order today. There is something called as a disinformation order that is basically the biggest threat to democracies all over the world. One of the countries that has mastered the art is Russia, with whom India's foreign policy is to play footsie with them because we might get some cheap oil. That is basically the hard truth that we need to accept. Number two, let us stop living in a fool's paradise, calling ourselves the mother of democracy. I mean, even within the country, people are sniggering. Forget the BBC and the New York Times. We are the father of the bap of dictatorship. India, under the BJP, and particularly since Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, is now very close to looking like a tin pot dictatorship or a banana republic. Now, let me address to you the BBC issue. Will Mr. Sibal today tell me that the Editors Guild of India, which has said that the decision of the government to do a transfer pricing investigation into the BBC is kosher? Because they have said, hang on, you got a miserable track record. Whether it's NewsClick, News Laundry, Dainik Bhaskar, Bharat Samachar, you can name them all, Amnesty International, The Wire. I mean, whatever the provocation, we all know that this is the iron hand of this government at play. They cannot take any criticism. And by the way, one that is very acutely uncomfortable for the Prime Minister, oh my God, let's not even talk about that Rubicon. Here is the fundamental point, and I'll speak to you as a banker. I have heard reports that this is a transfer pricing issue with the BBC. If anybody knows transfer pricing, they will tell you that, Anand, that transfer pricing doesn't require a sudden swoop of income tax routes, because it is basically an accounting process whereby certain funds may be transferred abroad and the services may be priced at a different level. I'm sure this information was available for a long time.
Yes.
So what is the trigger? The trigger is a BBC documentary that came 3 weeks ago, just 3 weeks ago, and raised some questions on the role of the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Narendra Modi, currently the Prime Minister of India, during the time of the Gujarat riots. And by the way, this is important to tell you, it is not just a BBC documentary report. They have used a British Foreign Office report, which means it is basically a government official document where they have come to the conclusion that Mr. Modi was directly responsible for allowing things to escalate where thousands of people died. That is the hard truth.
Thank you. Now, before Mr. Sibal responds, one or two things. In 2009, also for the same issue, 2001, 2002 and their accounting, they were under the radar. BBC queries had been raised. So their time and again, they have been under the radar of the tax rules, irrespective of the disposition. Secondly, sir, the aspect of what was a British foreign envoy doing on Indian soil in Gujarat at that time is a question that still lingers. Did he have the official diktat and permission to do it? And who are the British to come and audit what is happening in Gujarat and in India at that point in time is another question which all of us need to consider and answer, irrespective of our political leanings. Irrespective of our political leanings and ideological leanings, as a nation, as a country, the British were out in 1947. They had no business being in Gujarat and trying to do their own audits. They should not. And under whose this one did they have it? That's a larger question. But Mr. Sibal, would you want to respond to Sanjay Jha? Ji.
Frankly, if I had been told that Sanjay Jha would be only panelist with me, I wouldn't have attended. I wouldn't have accepted your invitation, frankly.
Because
you're not capable of rational debate.
Let him answer now. Let's not heckle each other. Nobody is interrupting anybody here.
Me as a right-wing, whatever. I mean, he's a totally unhinged fellow.
Don't get personal.
One minute. The rule applies to both sides, gentlemen. And Mr. Sanjay Jha, you are the one who started by making a personal attack at Mr. Kanwal Sibal. He has a right to respond to what you accused him of being. So allow him to do that, and then we'll move on.
I don't want to answer at all what he said because it's all utter rubbish and nonsense. You ask me a question and I'll respond to your question.
Now, let me ask you, Mr. Sibal. The Editors Guild has taken a position. Now, what would you say?
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the Editors Guild has taken a position where they believe that this is selective targeting of certain media and outlets who have been critical about the current disposition, and this is deliberate targeting. Now, is this something which is happening only now, or has it happened in the past? That's one aspect. Secondly, if it has happened in the past, does that justify it happening now? Should it happen now? Then where is free speech? Where are the restrictions? And now, how does media do its job?
See, a couple of things. First of all, we are talking about foreign media. The foreign media in a country, in a third country, doesn't operate on the same basis as local media. They have to seek permission to set up their office. And they have to abide by certain rules and regulations. They are not supposed to interfere in the internal politics or internal affairs of the country. Our media can do what it likes because it's our media. They have every right to speak about internal developments. This is perfectly normal. But the foreign media present in the country cannot have an agenda of its own where they trash the government, the sitting prime minister, the party. They have an ideological view. They have preconceived notions about how India should be governed, what kind of leadership it should have, what kind of economic policies it should pursue. And it's part of a very larger international game that is being played. Why is it that the governments of these countries are reaching out to us? We have developed a very positive relationship with them, whether it's the United States or Britain or France or Germany. But the media of these countries is very anti-Indian. There is a huge disconnect between what the government is trying to do to establish better ties, and the media thinks that it is their job to create more understanding, more suspicions, and alienate the Indian public and misinform their own public about what is happening in India. So we have to probe into what are the forces behind this which are not happy with the direction in which India is going. There's enough criticism at home. I'm not at all against it. They're perfectly free to do it. And if they have legitimate criticism, the government must change its ways of doing things. But the foreign media cannot dictate what we should do and launch a personal attack against the Prime Minister of a country. I mean, this is unheard of, but they do it. You seen The Economist when the elections were going to be fought in 2019. They actually said that India should not vote for Modi coming back to power. Is this journalism or is this politics? And constant, look at the BBC report recently on what's happening in Assam in terms of child marriages. We can have a view about that internally. We can say it is wrong. Some may say it is right.
Right.
But you see the BBC report on it, which actually they justify child marriages for religious, for humanitarian reasons.
So,
I mean,
point is that some
in
people cannot sit on their high horses and decide what is right and what is wrong, and then claim themselves to be perhaps the benchmarks when they themselves are not covered in greatness or covered in.
And let me make the final point.
Ji.
That all Russian channels have been banned in Europe. All Russian channels. Now, if freedom of speech, freedom of expression is so valuable, so much a fundamental value for these countries, why have they done that?
No,
why have they? We've not banned the BBC.
No, ironically, the CGTN, which stands banned in the UK, the BBC has invested. That's what British reports suggest. BBC is actually putting in money into Chinese state-owned media platforms and doing work for them.
Finally, another point which was raised just now about British diplomats sending back a report. I was Foreign Secretary then, and I'm aware of this. And I have written about this also. I took strong objection to this and issued a warning to the missions in Delhi not to interfere in our internal affairs. Because the British actually had circulated their negative report to all the EU missions here. The point is that one officer goes there without seeking any permission of any kind, and based on the reports he got at that time, which were not verified, which were emotional, he sent back a report. Now, after that, the Supreme Court set up the SIT. The SIT has exonerated Modi, but this particular BBC documentary totally ignores the Supreme Court judgment.
Right.
And if they had recognized the Supreme Court judgment, the first part of the BBC documentary couldn't have been made.
Well,
it
gentlemen,
was all made on the assumption.
I'm pressed for time. I know I have not been fair with Sanjay Jha because I had to give
I
him a
understand
chance.
you must
I have to give him a chance to rebut.
You must have got orders. Because Mr. Sibal is very upset. But I don't want to respond to his
Sanjay Ji, I'll tell you what.
absurd and atrocious garbage.
Sanjay
For
Ji,
the record, he's talked garbage. Sanjay Jha,
I know one thing, sir. You're far more capable than the level that you are currently engaging in the discourse now, and you're far more, and you can raise the level of the discourse. And I hope you will do it, sir, when we speak again next time very soon.
Give me equal airtime.
No, it's not about equal or unequal. I'm 3 minutes over on my show already, but okay. I'll tell you what, and I don't need to justify myself to you, but my point, sir, is that rather than argue on the subject, you went straight after the person itself, and then you tried to get personal with that person and turned around and said you're getting. No, sir, you did. Your first line on the show, sir, was a personal jibe at by Mr. Kanwal Sibal. Whereas I have immense respect for both of you gentlemen, irrespective of what you think of me. I have respect for you, and I believe that you can raise the level of discourse than what you have resorted to today, especially Sanjay Jha ji. This is my humble request to you. I have to move on for the moment, but with the promise that we will make up the time for you, Mr. Jha, the next time around. That's my assurance. I'm compelled to move because of the structure of the show itself. Thank you very much, Kanwal Sibal ji also. Namaste. Thank you.